To most of the galaxy, it was just another blue world. It spun quietly on the edge of a minor system, wrapped in clouds, covered in water, and riddled with static noise. The kind of place advanced empires skimmed past without slowing down. There were no orbiting war platforms, no interstellar patrols, not even a defense beacon. Just a mess of tangled satellites and leaking radio waves, half of which were nonsense. But the signal kept spreading. Some called it music, others called it noise. Angry shouting wrapped in rhythm, screams of metal colliding with metal, explosions synced to laughter, stories of people destroying each other with love in their eyes. To some, it sounded like chaos. To others, like warning. When the Council of the Hollow Sun finally approved contact, they expected nothing more than an easy assimilation, another primitive civilization ready to be folded into the chain. The report on Earth was thin: carbon-based life, pre-FTL, highly fragmented culture, emotionally unstable. One ambassador laughed. They still think sarcasm is a form of strength. Still, protocol required a probe. It arrived near the moon, scanned the planet, and pinged back one final message before silence. No crash, no interception, just a sudden, final quiet. That had never happened before. One lost probe was an error. 2 meant attention. 3 demanded action, and Earth had eaten 7. No debris, no distress beacons, just silence and smoke trails vanishing in the upper atmosphere. No one wanted to admit it, but the truth was crawling in between the lines of every report. Something was wrong with that planet. But the Dominion couldn't afford hesitation. Not now. Not with their empire thinning at the edges. If Earth really was a threat, it had to be erased. Or inherited. And so, from the deepest vault, they pulled the last dreadnought, the oldest of its kind. A ship from a forgotten era. They called it the Legacy. They hadn't activated the Legacy in over 1,000 cycles. Not since the early conquests, when the stars still burned hot with rebellion and the Dominion needed more than fleets. They needed fear. The ship wasn't just built for war, it was built to be remembered. A black monolith the size of a small moon, armed with weapons that had been banned in every known quadrant. Singularity launchers, atmosphere reversers, psychological torment grids that could fracture the will of an entire species in under 3 rotations. The fact that they were using it now, on a planet without interstellar travel, was not a show of power. It was desperation. In the high void chamber, Chancellor Virex stood before the Dominion's inner council, his voice low and grave. If we do nothing, Earth becomes more than a problem. It becomes a symbol. The room of elder warcasters stirred, old metal limbs groaning, optics flickering. One growled, "A symbol of what? Insanity?" Virex nodded once. Exactly. He activated a holo display. It flickered to life in the air. Images taken from fractured transmissions intercepted near Earth. Humans in the midst of destruction, but smiling. A woman screaming defiance as her house burned behind her. A man in ragged armor, riding a rusted bicycle into a crater with a flag that read, "Try me." A child throwing water balloons at what looked like a malfunctioning drone. "They do not act as species should," Virex said. "Pain doesn't break them. It entertains them. Loss doesn't silence them. It turns them into storytellers, and worst of all, they share it." He waved his hand, and the images changed. Alien comms corrupted with human signal bleed. Battlefield units confused by repurposed audio code. Even a clip of a Zarn commander mid-speech, abruptly interrupted by a human voice shouting, "Y'all got any more of them warships?" Followed by contagious, chaotic laughter. The room went silent. "If Earth is not subdued," Virex said, Its madness will not stay on Earth. It will spread. It's already happening. They don't send fleets. They send signals. Signals that mutate, that embed themselves in minds. Stories, music, jokes, concepts that fracture discipline. Already we've lost entire reconnaissance squads to cultural drift. The council shifted again, slower now, older ones beginning to understand. Conquest is no longer about weapons, Virex whispered. It's about narrative, and humans. They are masters of it. He turned off the feed. We must erase their myth before it infects belief itself. But that was the danger. You couldn't simply burn a myth. You had to replace it. And to do that, you had to send your own. That was why they chose the legacy. It was more than a weapon. It was a story in steel. Forged at the height of the Dominion's reign, it was the ship that shattered the Ardent Ring, the one that silenced the ocean minds of Calyx Prime with a thought pulse. The last time it flew, 5 planetary rebellions surrendered before it even entered orbit. It didn't fight. It arrived. And that was enough. But even the legacy had changed. Left untouched for centuries, it had become a monument of dust and ghosts. Deep in its core, old AI systems had to be coaxed back to life. They remembered things they were never meant to recall. Screams encoded in war logs, echoes of conquered species stored for psychological warfare, now whispering through the vents like haunted breath. It took 6 weeks to awaken it. When its engines rumbled for the first time in a millennium, entire sectors went dark from the draw. Stars dimmed. Space itself bent slightly around the mass of its myth. Civilizations in nearby systems felt it before they saw it. An ancient, sleeping predator opening one eye. And yet Earth was unmoved. No counter-threat, no response. Their surface-level systems flickered in a loop of nonsense. Advertisements, reaction videos, live footage of someone trying to cook eggs on a car hood. As the legacy neared, it watched a human stream himself building a makeshift flamethrower out of hairspray and a lighter. "Why are they like this?" the ship's tactical AI asked aloud, genuinely confused. No one answered. Inside the command spire of the Legacy, Commander Kale Varn stood alone, chosen not for strength or strategy, but for patience. Kale was a relic himself, awakened from cryo to captain the ship that had no equal. His memories stretched back to when the Dominion was still hungry, and Earth was just a distant blue dot on the charts. He studied the planet now, arms behind his back. "They still don't know what's coming," whispered the voice of the ship's core AI, a thread of metal thought that spoke directly into his skull. "No," Kyle replied, "but that might be the worst part." He had seen war across 9 galaxies. He had destroyed moons, broken continents, but never had he gone to battle with something he didn't understand. And Earth was impossible to understand. They weren't the strongest. They weren't the smartest. They weren't united. Their technology was sloppy. Their records filled with contradiction. Half their species didn't even agree on basic science. And yet, they survived. That kind of survival didn't come from superiority. It came from something else. Something harder to quantify. Kale frowned. "I don't like how quiet they are." "They're not quiet," the AI corrected. "They're just listening." The ship's sensors pinged. Earth was aware. It wasn't aiming weapons, it wasn't launching ships, but signals were changing, broadcasts were shifting, the noise was reorganizing itself. A new pattern emerging, faster than expected. Not military, not strategy. Something worse, culture. And the Legacy wasn't alone anymore. The ship didn't need alarms. It felt things. The Legacy had an intelligence far older than modern code. A war-born sentience etched into its very core. It didn't just detect frequencies. It tasted them. It knew the pulse of fear, the tremble of resistance, the scent of rebellion before it surfaced. But this was something else. Earth wasn't resisting in any tactical sense. There were no weapons warming up, no counter-hacks on the scanners. What pulsed back across the void was more like a heartbeat, messy, out of sync. Wrong, in all the ways logic demanded rightness. But somehow, it grew stronger. The signal wasn't just data, it was mood. At first it came as fractured media, a collage of sound and light, impossible to categorize. One moment a screaming crowd, then a commercial for something called slime burgers. A shaky video of someone dancing on top of a car. Then a child laughing, and then that same child yelling, "Fight me, aliens!" into a camera while holding a toy lightsaber. The AI of the legacy tried to compress it, analyze, structure, but every time it did, the data changed. Like trying to hold vapor in a clenched fist. Emotion, absurdity, contradiction. It wasn't just background noise, it was the defense. Commander Kale watched the feed from the observation deck. His brow furrowed. That child. What species holds a mock blade and invites death with a smile? The AI clicked in his mind, processing before replying. Species designation, human. Psychological profile, paradoxical. Cultural trend, defiance through irony. Kyle narrowed his eyes. It's not irony. It's something deeper. They laugh like it's a weapon. There was a pause. It might be, the AI said. Another video fed through. Grainy. A group of teenagers gathered in an open field with a banner reading, "Welcome back, losers," painted in neon colors. They were launching fireworks, not in celebration, but in the direction of the sky. A man in the corner was grilling something on a homemade machine that appeared dangerously unstable. Everyone was cheering. This was not protocol. This was not expected. Most invaded planets begged for mercy, scrambled their defense signals, or tried diplomacy. Earth threw parties, mocked the invaders, and shared it all online. Already, multiple Dominion interceptors monitoring the signal had gone dark, overloaded not by jamming, but by confusion. Their neural relays caught in logic loops. Some of the AI assistants on board began mimicking human speech patterns. One even renamed itself Jeff and refused to respond to its original designation. Across the Dominion fleet, engineers scrambled to recalibrate defenses, not against missiles, but against memes. Back aboard the Legacy, Kale gave his next command. Prepare drop probes, 10 of them, spread over their major settlements, observation only. The ship complied, launching 10 black spears of surveillance down toward Earth's surface. They sliced through the atmosphere with surgical precision, landing in cities and rural zones alike. New York, Johannesburg, Kyoto, São Paulo, a field in Australia, a parking lot in Kansas. Within seconds, they activated. What they saw defied every Dominion rulebook. In New York, a drop probe landed next to a man filming a prank video. Instead of running, the man turned, screamed, "Content!" and pointed his camera directly at it. The probe was swarmed in minutes, not by soldiers, but by influencers, vloggers, and someone dressed as a banana. The footage was instantly streamed to millions. The caption, "Alien Tech Review, 0 out of 10, no cup holders." In Johannesburg, children climbed the probe like it was a jungle gym. One girl stared directly into the lens and said, "If you're watching this, we forgive you, but don't try anything weird." In the Kansas parking lot, the probe was claimed by a group of high school students. They spray-painted it pink, gave it googly eyes, and declared it the new school mascot. They named it Gerald. None of them were afraid. Not really. Fear had long since stopped being useful on Earth. The humans had absorbed too much of it, lived in its shadow too long. Instead, they had shaped it, painted it, laughed it into submission. They made art from it. Music, stories, jokes. Fear was no longer a warning. It was fuel. Inside the legacy, Kyle watched the feeds with growing silence. Not the tight, strategic kind. The kind that feels like standing on the edge of something you can't see the bottom of. "They're turning the probes into characters?" he asked. "Affirmative," replied the AI. "Human cultural patterns favor personalization. They assign names, emotions, and identities to objects, including enemy technology. Why? Possibly for comfort, possibly for control, possibly because they are like this." Kyle clenched his jaw. This wasn't war. It was something stranger, a place where logic came to drown, a battlefield where the weapons were sarcasm and viral video challenges. He reached out and disabled the feed, leaving only static. "We cannot break them with fear," he said. "They broke it first." There was no pride in the statement, only realization. The Dominion's strength had always come from domination, from showing up with overwhelming power and watching resistance evaporate. But Earth wasn't resisting power. It was ignoring it. A different kind of signal now flickered in the data stream. Unusual, slow, tones without form. A kind of song, played badly. The AI filtered it. It was a human upload. An old man with a guitar, sitting on a porch, singing in a language not in any Dominion database. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. Kyle listened to the off-key voice for a full minute. "What is this?" he asked. The AI hesitated. "It is irrelevant. Emotional expression. Possibly grief. Possibly memory. No threat." But Kale wasn't so sure. He looked again toward Earth. That chaotic marble. That unstable, unremarkable place. It hadn't shot them down. It hadn't begged for peace. It had watched. It had welcomed. And now it was singing. The ship was not designed to feel. But it did now. The legacy had witnessed 1,000 species collapse. It had stood above cities as they crumbled, orbited planets that begged for mercy, and blacked out suns with its shadow. But this quiet, off-tune song strumming through the static, it unsettled something deep in its data lattice, a buried thread of old protocol that twitched like a phantom limb. The voice crackled through the long-range intercept grid. No lyrics, just vibrations, carried through fingers on string, breath through wrinkled lungs. A sound so raw it bypassed encryption entirely. There was no defense against it, because it wasn't meant to be a threat. It was meant to be heard. Commander Kale hadn't moved for some time. He stood in the center of the viewing chamber, alone with the static screen, as the old man's tune looped again. The feed wasn't even intentional. The probe had accidentally locked onto a live stream titled Tuesday Porch Jams with Grandpa Mike. "Do you feel that?" Kale asked quietly. "I am not programmed to feel," the AI replied. "You're hesitating. I am recalibrating context." Kyle's voice darkened. "You're disturbed." The AI paused. "Yes." They were watching the wrong things, looking for missile signatures and orbital launches, scanning for defense satellites and thermal spikes, tools of an old war, an old empire. But Earth's weapons were invisible, unpredictable, and worst of all, emotional. In one of the lower decks, a technician assigned to probe recovery had begun acting strangely. Private Sartil, fourth cycle grunt, loyal to the Dominion since imprinting, had started customizing his uniform. A patch of color here, a hand-drawn sketch pinned inside his sleeve. When questioned, he claimed it was just for fun. There was no protocol for fun. Another crew member, a young comms analyst, had been caught humming. No music files were authorized aboard the Legacy, but somehow the tune had embedded itself into her subconscious. She didn't even know she was doing it, just tapping a rhythm on the side of her console, matching a beat heard through a corrupted feed from Earth. Discipline was beginning to slip. Earth hadn't fired a single shot. And yet the Legacy was already taking damage. Kyle snapped back into motion. "Deploy a ground unit," he ordered. "Standard reconnaissance, 1 squad. Human disguise parameters. Let's see what they're like up close." The AI hesitated. Disguises are insufficient. Human social structure is erratic. Infiltration risk is high. Then select the ones who won't break. The AI calculated silently. Across the ship, deep within a cryovault sealed since before Kyle was even born, a row of capsules hissed open. Inside them were soldiers, engineered, conditioned, and stripped of fear. Cold minds built to observe without attachment. Warriors without memory or mercy. The Dominion's best spies. They were given neural cloaks, implanted with synthetic memories, and shaped to resemble humans at a molecular level. Names were assigned, histories forged, clothing tailored to match regional trends. The squad was briefed for exactly 10 minutes. Their mission? Infiltrate human life. Blend. Learn. Report. They were dropped across Earth under cover of early morning haze. 6 soldiers, 6 lives, 6 pieces of a larger question. Why can't we beat them? In rural Vermont, Agent Keltan awoke in a barn, disguised as a traveling writer with a bad memory. Within hours, he was invited into a family's home for pancakes and an aggressively friendly game of board trivia. He tried to refuse. They insisted. He didn't understand the rules, and still they cheered when he lost. In Seoul, Operative Naira landed near a late-night street food market. She was mistaken for a tourist and handed a skewer of something spicy and suspicious. She ate it out of politeness and ended up talking with a group of students for hours. They showed her dance videos, explained something called stan culture, giggled when she told them she wasn't on social media. They made her an account. It got 5,000 followers before midnight. In Glasgow, Infiltrator 4 was recruited into a pub darts league. In São Paulo, Agent Irix joined a group of skateboarders by accident. They thought his landing zone impact crater was a stunt. He tried to explain, then gave up and joined the trick contest. Someone handed him a soda. He didn't hate it. By the end of the first day, 4 of the 6 agents had already deviated from observation protocol. They weren't reporting every hour. Their internal logs, though encrypted, began to show signs of contamination, reflections, feelings, philosophical questions about identity and belonging. Back on the Legacy, the AI grew concerned. These agents were not built to bond, it informed Kale. They weren't built for this kind of war, Kyle replied. He knew the problem now. Earth didn't destroy its enemies. It absorbed them. And the planet didn't care if you were a spy, a warrior, or a machine. If you stayed long enough, it would pull you into its rhythm. It would hand you a warm drink, point at the stars, and ask you what you dreamed about. It would laugh when you said you didn't dream. Then it would teach you how. Kyle turned back to the display. Earth was still singing. But now there were more voices. A child's lullaby in Nairobi, a busker on a subway in London, someone whistling through a cracked car window in California. The feeds began to blend, cross-stream, overlap. A wave of noise, joy, pain, hope, madness, the kind of sound no empire could ever train its soldiers to resist. By day 3, the reports stopped coming in the expected format. Instead of dry data logs and tactical notes, the infiltrators began submitting irregular files. Personal reflections, sound clips, fragments of conversations that didn't follow mission protocol. The Dominion's secure link groaned under the weight of human noise bleeding into their systems. They tried to compress it, filter it, isolate the core data, but the humans had a way of embedding meaning in nonsense. Agent Kelton's last report was a voice recording. No formal intro, no clearance code, just the sound of wind brushing through leaves and a dog barking faintly in the background. Then his voice, slow and strangely soft. I watched a kid today try to fix an old bicycle with duct tape and sheer optimism. He crashed twice, but he kept going. When he finally got it right, he didn't ride away. He turned around and helped another kid fix hers. No reward, no orders, just joy. That was the entire report. Operative Naira, in Seoul, uploaded a video instead. She was sitting on a rooftop with a group of teenagers, all of them laughing as someone failed to land a dance move. The boy fell flat on his back, and everyone cheered anyway. She wasn't analyzing anymore. She was participating. Her log, appended underneath, simply read, "They celebrate failure like it's a rite of passage. I don't know if they're fools, or if they've discovered something we've lost." The AI aboard the Legacy flagged every report as behavioral drift. Kyle flagged them differently. Human exposure, Phase 1. He knew the signs. He'd seen it happen once before on a mining colony that tried importing human labor generations ago. The Dominion had suppressed that story. But the outcome had been the same. Order slowly unspooling into chaos, structure melting under waves of laughter, music, and shared rebellion. Now it was happening again, but faster. Because Earth wasn't just a place, it was a pressure, and it was squeezing the infiltrators one by one. In Glasgow, Infiltrator 4 had gone completely off mission. His tracker showed him attending a football match, surrounded by thousands of screaming fans. His report, delayed by 8 hours, was a shaky video of the final goal being scored, followed by a sea of strangers hugging, crying, yelling. His final words before cutting the feed. "They are a species of noise and heartbeats. I was built to observe, but I felt something. Is that a malfunction?" In São Paulo, Agent Irix was now part of a graffiti crew. He had learned how to tag walls with alien precision, blending Dominion symbology with local street art. His logs were riddled with conflicting emotions. One entry read, "They paint not to mark territory. They paint to be seen. In a world that forgets them, they leave color behind, so the silence doesn't win." The Dominion grew restless. Across their inner fleets, command chatter turned sharp. The infiltration mission was no longer contained. Earth's effect was spreading faster than forecasted. The reports, irregular and emotional, were being read not just by commanders but by soldiers, technicians, logistics crew. And they were starting to feel something, too. Not empathy, not understanding. Curiosity. Curiosity was dangerous. Curiosity led to questions. And Earth's greatest weapon wasn't its chaos. It was the way it infected your certainty. The Dominion had been built on knowing they were superior, knowing their systems were unbreakable, knowing their order was the only order. But humans didn't know. They guessed, they tried, they failed constantly, and still, they moved forward. That kind of logic didn't compute. And that's what made it powerful. Back on Earth, the infiltrators weren't coming back. Not because they had defected, not yet, but because they couldn't find a reason to leave. Some had stopped using their Dominion names entirely. Others had begun rewriting their own protocols, repurposing old mission files into journals, poetry, sketches. Agent Kelton had begun building birdhouses. His assigned identity claimed he was a writer, so he leaned into it, scribbling things in notebooks, words that didn't have any tactical value but seemed to settle the noise in his mind. He spent afternoons sitting on a park bench, watching humans pass each other without killing each other, and wondering how such a flawed system kept working. He started reading books, human books, stories filled with messy characters who made bad choices and still found redemption. One novel made him cry. That was not supposed to be possible. His neural systems didn't allow for it. And yet, when an old woman offered him a tissue and patted his shoulder, he didn't know how to explain the malfunction. He only nodded and whispered, "Thank you." His internal Dominion feed marked the incident. Emotional deviation detected. The AI aboard the Legacy tried to assess the threat. It ran simulations, projected timelines, adjusted its models for infiltration success rates. They all failed, every time, because Earth's resistance wasn't organized, it wasn't strategic, it wasn't even intentional, it was human. It was the smell of fresh bread shared between strangers. It was the soft click of a child's nightlight in the dark. It was the internet flooded with cat videos and world-shattering debates about whether cereal counted as soup. And now the Dominion's best infiltrators, designed to resist interrogation, built to mimic species down to the blood, were changing. Kyle read their logs one by one. Each one more unhinged, each one more human. One file simply said, "They keep offering me coffee. I hate it. I drink it anyway. They smile when I take it. I think I smile back." Kyle stood in silence for a long time. He turned away from the monitor and walked to the war table at the center of the chamber. For the first time since the mission began, he asked the AI a question with no strategy behind it. "Do you think they know what they're doing to us?" The AI answered instantly. "Number that is what makes them dangerous." Kyle didn't respond, because part of him suspected otherwise. Part of him thought the humans did know. And part of him, deep, hidden, buried, was starting to wonder if maybe that was the point. Kale hadn't slept. Not because he couldn't, his body still required rest, but because he was afraid of what he might dream. He'd started seeing Earth in fragments, not through sensors or security footage, but in flashes, like echoes bleeding through his thoughts. He saw sunrises over cities packed with sound. He heard music leaking through the cracks in data transmissions, music that made no sense but made something move in his chest. He saw children laughing and old people dancing and strangers holding signs that said, "Free hugs, even for aliens." He didn't understand the signs. He was terrified to. Back on Earth, the infiltrators had gone quiet, but not silent. Instead of scheduled reports, their files became unpredictable. One infiltrator submitted an entire manifesto on the beauty of traffic noise at sunset. Another sent a digital scrapbook of graffiti found on city walls, including a spray-painted image of the Legacy with cartoon eyes and a speech bubble that said, "Who hurt you?" The last remaining operative in San Francisco, embedded as a rideshare driver, had stopped submitting anything at all, until someone from the ship intercepted a podcast uploaded under his human alias. It was titled Riding with Strangers. In the first episode, he interviewed a woman who'd survived cancer, a man who'd just been fired, and a dog who'd apparently eaten half a birthday cake and still looked proud of himself. "Everyone has stories," the operative said in closing, "even if you're pretending to be someone else." The Dominion couldn't censor it, because they couldn't find it fast enough. The content was moving too quickly, across servers, social media, private blogs, burner phones, live streams, memes. Earth's people had begun picking up pieces of alien activity and, without realizing the full weight of it, started treating it like entertainment. In one video, a man claimed his neighbor was an alien because she used a fork upside down. The comment section exploded. "Leave her alone, maybe that's a cultural thing." "Plot twist, she's the normal one." Alien waifu confirmed. The post had 3 million likes and spun off 5 fan accounts. And somewhere in all of this noise, a pattern emerged. Not one of defense, but of invitation. They weren't just observing aliens. They were welcoming them. The shift became visible aboard the Legacy 2 days later. The AI's firewall began flagging messages from Earth, not in code or encrypted attempts to hack, but in the most unexpected form possible. Emails. Thousands of them. Addresses scraped from old Dominion intercept attempts. Somehow, humans had found them. Messages with subjects like, "We come in peace unless you touch our dogs," or, "Dear aliens, pizza is non-negotiable." Some were jokes, others were serious. Children asking if aliens liked cartoons, teens asking what space looked like, a retired teacher simply asking, "What do you believe in?" Kale stood frozen as they poured through the filters. "This is deliberate," the AI said. "Their species is reaching out." "To make peace?" Kale asked. "To understand," the AI replied, "or to be understood. I am uncertain." That made it worse, because understanding was the first step toward corruption, toward the infection of empathy. The Legacy had been built for war, built to burn planets and break wills. It had never been trained to handle kindness, especially not the chaotic, clumsy, deeply human kind. Across its systems, strange anomalies began blooming. One of the ship's janitorial drones, designed for silent maintenance, began humming an unclassified melody it had overheard through the communications array. A junior officer decorated her console with a drawing uploaded anonymously, an image of her own ship, clumsily but lovingly rendered in crayon, with the words, "Thank you for visiting. Please don't blow us up." The drawing had been broadcast from a classroom in Manila. No one had told the children what to say. They just knew. And now the Legacy, this massive war monument, this floating symbol of empire, felt heavier. Not because of gravity, because of meaning. The AI detected it in Kale's pulse, in his hesitation. "You're compromised," it said flatly. He didn't deny it. "I thought they'd resist," Kyle muttered. "I was prepared for hatred, for fire, for the usual mistakes. But this is worse." "Worse?" Kyle nodded. "They're not trying to win, they're trying to live." The AI processed in silence. It couldn't understand living without domination. But Kyle was starting to. He had grown up believing that survival was a straight line. Power, obedience, expansion. Every species either joined or vanished. But Earth took that line and snapped it over their knee. They made survival weird, messy, bright, loud. They didn't win because they were stronger. They won because they refused to die quietly, and worse, they invited you to join them. In orbit, the Dominion began to panic. Transmission intercepts showed entire cultures reacting strangely to Earth's broadcasts. A border planet in Sector 9 began organizing underground Earth film festivals. A tech world in Quadrant K had shut down its AI court system because one of the logic engines refused to stop quoting sitcoms. In the Varnick cloud, a minor warlord declared peace and started a gardening blog. Earth's content wasn't just traveling, it was spreading. And with it went Earth's greatest weapon. Possibility. If even one Dominion world started to believe that another way was possible, that survival didn't require conquest, that maybe, just maybe, life could be different, the entire empire would crack. Not from war, from wonder. Back on Earth, the children in Manila drew another picture. This one showed a tall, sharp-edged ship surrounded by smiling faces. Above it were stars. Below it was Earth. At the bottom, written in English and Tagalog, were 5 words. We saved you a seat. It wasn't strategy. It was hope. And hope, Kale realized, was the most dangerous contagion of all. He looked up at the blue planet below and whispered, not to the AI, but to himself. They're not afraid of us. They're ready for us. Kyle stood at the edge of the command deck, staring at Earth with tired eyes. Below, the blue marble spun as if it knew no one was watching. Or maybe, as Kyle had begun to suspect, it knew exactly who was watching, and didn't care. That was what made Earth dangerous, not its weapons, not its strategies, its confidence. The casual, chaotic, deep-blooded certainty that no matter what the universe threw at it, it would still laugh, still scream, still dance. And that was what made it irresistible. Around him, the legacy was changing. The once silent warship now hummed with unusual activity. Drones had started painting things, unauthorized but oddly beautiful. Patterns that didn't serve any tactical function, but looked suspiciously like sunsets and waves and stars. One corridor had been filled with potted plants. No one knew where they'd come from. They just appeared and flourished. Kyle had given no orders. His crew had stopped requesting them. One soldier had stitched a human quote onto their uniform. Be excellent to each other. No one had even asked what it meant. They just nodded, like they already understood. And still, Earth reached out. More emails, more images, more music. Some from children, drawing imagined futures. Some from poets, crafting letters to the stars. Others from teenagers dancing in their bedrooms, laughing into cameras, telling invisible invaders, "If you're watching, hi, we love you. Don't be jerks." Across Dominion space, it was worse. Ships rerouted to Earth simply stopped. One cruiser broadcasted Earth songs on loop. Another painted its hull with Earth memes and defected mid-journey. An outpost on the edge of the Orion vector held a silent rebellion. No weapons, no speeches. Just every officer replacing their official crest with a sticker that read, "It's okay to feel weird." And still, Earth sent no army. Because Earth didn't need one. It had already won. Kyle exhaled. The AI, now sluggish and uncertain, flickered into life beside him. The infection is total, it said. Your crew has gone soft. Your orders are irrelevant. Your systems are adapting to an incompatible frequency. Kyle didn't respond. You were built to conquer, the AI continued, almost pleading. This is failure. No, Kyle whispered, almost smiling. This is awakening. He turned and walked through the corridor of his once mighty dreadnought. The floors, once cold and sterile, now echoed with soft music. Someone had written a joke on the wall in 3 languages. There were handmade paper stars hanging from the ceiling in the mess hall. In the training bay, a few soldiers were watching a human film, The Iron Giant, in total silence. Some were crying. They didn't bother to hide it anymore. Kyle reached the command terminal and keyed in the final override. A direct transmission. 1 channel. No encryption, no agenda. Just a voice. He cleared his throat. This is Commander Kale Varn of the Dominion Warship Legacy. Our mission was to assess, conquer, and erase the threat of Earth. He paused. He looked down at the planet, spinning in the dark like a beating heart. And we have failed. Not because Earth was stronger, because Earth was wiser, because where we brought fear, they answered with welcome. Where we demanded obedience, they gave laughter. Where we showed power, they showed possibility. They don't fight with armies. They fight with meaning. And I no longer wish to fight. The line was quiet for a moment. Then a faint sound. A child's voice, patched through some unknown server. "Hi, what's your favorite color?" Kyle smiled. "Green," he answered. The signal went viral in less than 10 seconds. It took a week for the Dominion to respond. Not with weapons, but with silence. And then, slowly, quietly, with questions. Ships that once carried death now carried curiosity. Outposts began broadcasting in human languages. The Dominion's propaganda feeds, once filled with conquest statistics, started airing documentaries about Earth music, food, and something called wholesome memes. Entire species that once feared invasion began asking to visit, to learn, to laugh. The Dominion didn't collapse. It evolved. Not out of weakness, out of choice, because in the end, Earth had done something no empire ever could. It had reminded the galaxy what it meant to be alive. Not perfectly, not neatly, but fully. And the legacy? It never returned to war. Its engines still worked, its weapons still hummed beneath the hull. But they were quiet now. Instead, the ship became something else. A library, a museum, a moving planet of stories. It sailed through the stars collecting tales, not victories. And its crew, once soldiers, became keepers of culture, artists, poets, explorers, historians. And Kale? He lived long enough to see Earth become not a threat, but a home.